I will calm right down, but if you cuff me, I swear to God I'll be a problem. You don't cuff me for standing up for women's rights. Don't cuff me.
That was audio from the arrest of Father Ted co-creator and somewhat obsessive anti-trans activist Graham Linehan on Monday morning. The arrest took place at Heathrow Airport after Linehan stepped off a flight from Arizona in the United States. He says he was taken to a police cell, interviewed, and then released on bail with only one condition: no more posting on X. In a statement, the Metropolitan Police gave some of Linehan's posts on social media as the reason for the arrest, saying this: the man in his 50s was arrested on suspicion of inciting violence. This is in relation to posts on X. He has now been bailed pending further investigation. Now, the police haven't said what posts triggered the arrest, but Linehan has said it relates to 3 posts from April this year. So the first 2 are from the 19th of April. One is a photo of a rally in support of trans rights that took place in Brighton in the spring with the caption, "A photo you can smell." Then in response to a comment on that first post, Linehan said, "I hate them, misogynists and homophobes. Fuck them." The third post was published the next day with Linehan saying this: if a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he is committing a violent, abusive act. Make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him in the balls. Now, we only have Linehan's words that these were the posts behind his arrest. The police haven't confirmed this. I mean, my own personal opinion is that the first 2 tweets are very different from the third tweet. So the first 2 tweets were rude. The third tweet is incitement. Whether or not that warrants an arrest is a question we'll discuss. Linehan, for his part, also says it wasn't just a couple of bobbies waiting for him at the airport, but 5 armed police officers. To many, even those who deplore Linehan's views, the whole episode did strike one as overkill. Now, one of those people who thinks that this was inappropriate behaviour from the police, or at least from sort of law enforcement in general, was Mark Rowley, Met Commissioner. He's released a statement saying this: while the decision to investigate and ultimately arrest the man was made within existing legislation, which dictates that a threat to punch someone from a protected group could be an offence, I understand the concern caused by such incidents given differing perspectives on the balance between free speech and the risks of inciting violence in the real world. Most reasonable people would agree that genuine threats of physical violence against an identified person or group should be acted upon by officers. Such actions can and do have serious and violent real-world implications. But when it comes to lesser cases where there is ambiguity in terms of intent and harm, policing has been left between a rock and a hard place by successive governments who have given officers no choice but to record such incidents as crimes when they're reported. Then they are obliged to follow all lines of inquiry and take action as appropriate. He says, I don't believe we should be policing toxic culture wars, debates, and officers are currently in an impossible position. I have offered to provide suggestions to the Home Office on where the law and policy should be clarified. Greater clarity and common sense would enable us to limit the resources we dedicate to tackling online statements to those cases creating real threats in the real world. If agreed, we could be ready to test new approaches quickly within a matter of weeks. As an immediate way of protecting our officers from the situation we find ourselves in today, we will be putting in place a more stringent triaging process to make sure only the most serious cases are taken forward in future where there is a clear risk of harm or disorder. I suppose it's that clear risk of harm or disorder that probably wasn't there, I would imagine, in the case of Linehan. The Met Police have now dropped their investigation into Graham Linehan, and Health Secretary Wes Streeting sided with Mark Rowley on the Today programme.
As the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary have been clear, we want the police to focus on policing streets rather than tweets. And it's very easy for people to criticise the police, but the thing that we are always mindful of as a government that backs the police to keep us safe, that the police are there to enforce the laws that we as Parliament legislate for. So if over the years, with good intentions, Parliament has layered more and more expectation on the police and diluted the focus and priorities of the public, that is obviously something that we need to look at. When it comes to speech,
what about, things like
when it comes to speech, context is king. And we do have to, I think, as legislators, tread really carefully when it comes to boundaries of free speech.
Linehan's arrest has been fodder for some powerful people with an interest in installing a right-wing government in the UK, quote tweeting J.K. Rowling, asking, what the fuck has the UK become? This is totalitarianism. So that's what J.K. Rowling said. Elon Musk retweets saying, police state, 11 million views. Writer Nasha Walter made this point. I see a massive outcry here about the arrest of Graham Linehan. Fair enough, it seems absurd and authoritarian. I'm not seeing so much of an outcry, though, about the arrests of Tim Crosland and Paddy Friend of Defend Our Juries. These arrests are also absurd and authoritarian. That's a reference to the arrest of 7 Defend Our Juries spokespeople on Tuesday by counter-terror police, who accused them of being in breach of the Terrorism Act for organising Zoom calls to protest the prescription of Palestine action. Linehan has now said he intends to sue the Met Police for wrongful arrest, false imprisonment, and breaches of his free speech rights. Barry, what do you make of this? I suppose I'm just going to reread the one tweet that I do think is probably, it probably should be criminal, but also is it a useful use of police time? Because obviously there are lots of crimes that aren't investigated, and maybe. But if a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he is committing a violent, abusive act. Make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him in the balls. That is incitement, but whether it warrants 5 armed police at an airport is a somewhat different matter. What's your take on this?
First of all, I should admit I have some skin in the game here because Linehan has gone after me on Twitter quite a lot over the last few weeks. So, I make sure I'm not going to be biased here. But the tweet is absolutely reprehensible. It's a disgusting tweet, and it could be construed as an incitement to violence, I guess. He says it was a joke, something to do with height disparity. I mean, God, this guy used to be one of the best comedy writers in the world, and this is the level of his stuff now. But I am probably going to be really unpopular here because I do think that it was an overstep. I think he was arrested under the Public Order Act. It seems kind of absurd to me. The fact that 5 police turned up at the airport seems kind of absurd to me. The fact that he has claimed that they were armed, again, seems kind of absurd. And it does seem to me like a waste of police time. I do want to say that it is galling to hear Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting talking today about overzealous policing, after proscribing a protest group protesting a genocide and arresting, pensioners for holding up placards, really galling to hear them talk like that today. But again, I think that we need to be careful of abusing legislation. Clearly the anti-terror legislation has been abused to prescribe Palestine action. And I want to say that's obviously a much more egregious and serious and consequential case than this storm in a teacup. But also I think that we are in danger of using legislation legislation in a political manner, making complaints to the police about people who you disagree with, terminally online culture wars, resulting in police going and knocking on people's doors or wasting their time turning up at an airport. Really, you said it earlier, but I'm glad that maybe they've done him a favor by banning him from Twitter for a while, and he can go out there and, like the young people say, touch grass. Maybe with the likes of Linehan, what the police should be doing is taking them out for a walk in a forest, and instead of arresting them for these absurd tweets. So yeah, it's completely reprehensible. And I think, every day he's out there on Twitter attacking people in a really bigoted manner. But was an arrest the appropriate response for this tweet? I'm not sure.